Welcome to the StoryPowers Podcast, a show about the power of stories, the people who tell them, and why you should be doing it too. I'm your host, Francisco Mahfuz. My guest today is Daniel Heuser Prestes. Daniel is a creative strategist focused on brand transformation. He uses human experiences, data, and cultural insights as a foundation to help companies be braver, more relevant, and impactful. He has worked in 3 FIFA World Cup campaigns with Adidas and AB InBev. He ran out of space on his CV, I think, but I can tell you, he's so good at making sound effects that if they ever make another Police Academy movie, he would be my first pick as the beatbox guy. If you like the show, I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe and leave an iTunes review. I'm not sure if it helps other people find it, but it definitely helps my self-esteem, because nothing says you're worthy like a 5-star rating. Ladies and gentlemen, Daniel Heuser Prestes. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Francisco. Thanks for having me. Wow, that was quite an introduction. I think, it goes a long way to back in the day when we were like cracking jokes and trying to make it as comedians, I guess, right?
Well, after all the weird stuff we did while we were at university together, is having a podcast to talk about storytelling in marketing the weirdest thing?
It probably is. I mean, we could be like worldwide famous now and doing, sitcoms or even have our own TV shows and online on YouTube or something. But I guess, having a podcast was not something we saw it coming, right?
Yeah, I think the problem with our world domination projects is that we thought we were really funny. No one seemed to be willing to give us money for it. And that was perhaps a little bit of an obstacle as a career prospect.
Yesterday, I was talking to a friend and he's like, "Oh man, you're really funny. You should be, maybe pursuing a career in that." And I said, well, the term I use is that my sense of humor is not unanimous. I try to make it slightly better, but there you go.
Yeah, I tend to think of that as that I am normal person funny. I don't think I am comedian funny, which is very different. Cracking a couple of jokes with your friends in the space of 5 minutes is one thing. Cracking, 50 jokes in the space of an hour in front of 1,000 people, not necessarily the same thing.
Yeah, it's probably the equivalent of, considering yourself not to be that ugly when you're a teenager, right? You just like, oh, I'm good, normal, good looking, not good looking, but not as well. And I guess as a grown-up, you just try to be like, to have a sense of humor that somehow is, slightly better than average. That's what we aim for, I guess.
But it's also true that given our age, being good-looking nowadays just means having hair and not being overly fat. So I think we're both just about okay in that sense.
Yeah. Well, now that you frame it this way, I think we're like way above average.
Yeah, you gotta
during the quarantine and the lack of haircuts. I think we're in a good place.
Indeed. As you well remember, I quit marketing school or advertising school halfway through, depriving our football team of a magnificent goalkeeper. But up until that point, there was no talk of storytelling or anything like storytelling in the classes we took together. So when was your first exposure to that?
When you consider storytelling into this creative universe setting, it's almost like a meta discussion because you have a few layers of storytelling, if you like. The first one is internal. When an agency, for instance, receives a brief or a request from a client, internally you need to discuss and convince other people. And there is a specific way of doing things. You have a creative department that is responsible for coming up with the ideas. Myself as a strategist, I'm kind of like the bridge between the client, the business, and the consumer, and the creative world. And you need to find a way of telling stories internally first, so then people jump with you and they're like, oh, this is a good idea. We should be doing exactly what Daniel said. So that's the first layer of storytelling, and it takes a lifetime to do this properly. I would say that's probably the hardest one. Then you have, between the agency and the client. How do you convince the client? How do you tell a story to the brand owner, let's say, that, they should be doing X or Y, or, changing their logo or doing something they never did? I mean, it's quite scary. And companies tend to go for, benchmarks, like, has this been done before? And if the answer is yes, 98% of the companies will say, well, then I'll do it, because there is not that much risk. And then there is the third layer of storytelling, which, maybe that's kind of like the more apparent from the outside, which is like, how does a company or, a brand speaks to a consumer or a person? But I would almost like break down into those three. The first time I came across, it was back in 2006, perhaps. And I think, you spend a lot of time as a junior person on the first two layers, like speaking to clients, speaking internally. And of course, it takes a while until your idea kind of like makes it through the end. And that is the idea that people in the real world will see it, or, the story that people will see it. But yeah, I think, you start early, but you start with the boring parts of the storytelling, which is internal, I guess.
So in 2006, when you first came across it, did people call it storytelling? Or was this just how things were done, but nobody gave it a name? Or was it, oh, no, we need to look at the storytelling aspects of this campaign or something along those lines?
Yeah, they do. I mean, it is a term used. Sometimes, for instance, when it is like presenting an idea to a client, you just say, we're going to pitch it. It's about pitching. But just to give you an indication of, how important in my first job, like, when I became slightly more senior, we paid the junior guys acting classes, because the way you tell a story is so important. And, it is a staple in the business. Like, you need to know that if you cannot tell a story, then, you're going to have a lot of difficulty. So yeah, people do call it storytelling, but not all the time, I guess.
And how much does what people understand as classic storytelling figure into the way agencies either think or talk about stories? And what I mean here by classic is things like, the hero's journey, or you having story archetypes. So, rags to riches and the quest and things of that nature. How much does that factor into an agency?
A lot of clients love that Jungian archetype approach. And as a strategist, you need to go deeper into that, like especially brands or, companies that have a portfolio of brands. So working with ABI, for example, AB InBev, the biggest brewery in the world, they have hundreds of brands. So they use the archetype approach to define, like, wow, this brand is going to be the hero. This brand is going to be the magician, the sage. This one is going to be the magician. So yeah, it is well used. I would say more for FMCG clients that need to organize their portfolio.
Remind me what a FMCG stands for?
Fast market consumer goods. So basically the stuff you find on the supermarket, like chocolate bars or beer or stuff you've been eating during the quarantine, I guess. So yeah, it is used internally. We don't use that language that much. We don't say like, oh, let's make it a magician. It's more like, if the client believes in that and that's a battle not worth fighting, let's just embrace it and use it.
So this is interesting because if you don't use those terms, do you have your own terms?
Yes.
Okay. And what types? So if you don't talk in terms of the hero or the guide or whatever the sage, what do you call it?
It depends on, I guess, the culture and the type of business. I worked for a computer games company, and they had a different way of framing any creative discussion. The word narrative comes up a lot. So like, what is the narrative? What is the climax? What is the role? Currently, a lot of the talk in this business is about purpose, perhaps sometimes too much, but like what does this brand believe in? How you tell that story is important. So, all those words, somehow they link back to, to storytelling. in my opinion, now we're living a transition into more, and apologies for the lingo here, but it's more about story doing. You see, like in the latest 6 months, all the shifts that are happening with coronavirus and the social unrest in the US, or around the globe. People don't want to hear a brand talking about stuff. They like, what are you doing? What are you doing about it? That's the most important question. So the same for a creative business. Like, they need to adapt quick. Like, it's not about, like, there is nothing we can say now that will make this brand look better. So are we willing to do something to help society, to help this group of people? Yes or no? And then the mindset needs to change. Like, how do you tell a story through actions? So that's why, like, sometimes, like, yeah, there is a lot of storytelling, especially when you talk about the creative department, the guys coming up with ideas for films, and sometimes like a long form content movie or a print ad. They talk about storytelling a lot, but in a broader sense is we use different words, and I think now is more about actions than words, honestly.
What would you consider to be an example of story doing? So how does a company go about using story doing instead of storytelling?
That's a great question. It's probably already like old as an example, but I think illustrates quite well. Like, when you look at Red Bull, they don't do advertising, or when they do, is like so minimal. But they decided to prove the point that they are about adventure and excitement, and it gives you wings by literally throwing a guy out of the stratosphere. And of course, there is storytelling around it, because you need to tell, like, once you've done something, you need to tell the thing that you did. So that comes with it, but it doesn't lead the charge, if it makes sense. They created the Red Bull Air Racing. You invent a sports category that didn't exist before. You sponsor Formula One and football and so many other things, culture, like music. So that's how they that's how they talk to people. That's how they convey their stories. So that's one example. When you look at the fintech transformation happening around the globe, here in the UK, you have Monzo as the big shiny startup doing this. Like, a few months ago, they've never done advertising, or they didn't tell stories in a more traditional way. All they did was to create an amazing experience, and throughout that, people will feel like, wow, this brand gets me. And at the end of the day, I mean, this is kind of like the objective: to make people give a shit, to make people care about you, and to make that story somehow ownable to you, like unique to you, and not just like one size fits all, like, kind of story.
With the Red Bull example, and I'm thinking of Nike now. I think Nike did something similar in Brazil. Would it be fair to say that the difference here when it comes to story doing or storytelling is that, say, with traditional storytelling and advertising, you are filming or you're putting in print fiction. You created a story, it's now on a magazine, it's now on TV, but it's fiction. It's nothing actually happened outside a studio or outside the mind of a creative. Whereas with story doing is instead of filming a commercial, there is an event that actually happens. I think the one I'm thinking of with Nike was there was some, I think it was a Rio São Paulo race or something along those lines that they got involved with, and they did that instead of doing a commercial about it.
Yeah. I mean, there in the traditional storytelling business, let's call it that, in advertising or the creative industry, there is the experiential, as they call it. They create concerts or a marathon race or an ultra marathon race, like the Nike case you mentioned. So there is already that. So there is already some sort of doing in the traditional marketing mix, if you like. I think what I mean by story doing is basically leading with that. Is realizing that the tank is empty and there's nothing you can say that will convince people, to change their minds about you, or, to buy something or to do something you want them to do. So I think it's more like on the origin of the intention, because traditional marketing has concerts. Like, a lot of brands sponsor musicians or festivals, and in a way this is like action, and then you talk about it like whatever you did in the concert. But going back to your point, I think Yeah, 90% of the time, the traditional filmed storytelling is more about fiction than it is about reality. There are cases that they decide to embrace a real story, or they say like, yeah, let's take like real people and show this. But yeah, you're right. Usually one is more about like, let's do something and then let's brag about it. The other one is, let's just talk about this amazing world and let's get people excited.
I think I got distracted there for a second because you said you're right. I don't think I've ever heard those words coming out of your mouth to me.
That's very true.
Took 20 years, but we got there. 20 years, but we got there.
That comes with age. I'm totally getting there.
Yes, you realize the political aspects of lying sometimes. There was something you said before I wanted to pick you up on. When you were talking about the elements of storytelling and how companies understand them, you said that people focus too much on purpose to your liking. Explain.
I think it's important for the private and the business to realize that they have a broader role in society than simply returning profits to shareholders. And thankfully that penny drop moment is happening across the globe, and everyone is sort of mobilizing around that idea, and governments, businesses, and citizens are more like engaged, like we need to bring change fast, otherwise we are in trouble. When I say sometimes too much is that there are companies, for instance, during the COVID-19 crisis, that they were like, I get you, I'm with you, this is my purpose. And it's like, this is not the time to talk. So sometimes, like some companies use that new purpose avenue, which is amazingly exciting, but they use that as a way to revive the old storytelling approach. So it's an excuse to do a 60-second TV commercial because they believe in something. There is a purpose behind that. And because, you've seen how this brand act in real life, like you are a consumer, is like, this is not real. So I think that's my only caveat on the purpose avenue. I think it's incredibly exciting, especially with the opportunities that technology bring. You can do so many things with a company that has purpose, that is open to use technology, and is willing to embrace creativity.
When you talk about the company discussing a purpose that is not actually true, now I understand you could get into a lot of trouble by discussing this to a certain extent. But what I wanted to understand is, when you're talking to a company and you're discussing things like purpose or discussing their story, I understand that if the company is actually doing certain things, and if it's very easy to point to examples in the company's history and actions that supports the narrative that is being discussed, that's always easier. But surely I would expect that there are plenty of cases where the company wants a narrative or wants to change a narrative, and the agency might be looking at that and going, well, Philip Morris, we can't have a health purpose in your advertising because it just makes no sense. So, how do agencies try to square that circle?
Well, I mean, you said it, like the job is to help clients make an impact in society and within people's lives. It's not to, if they wanted just to tell the story they wanted to tell, they would probably go to a production company and say like, hey, listen, this is the story I want to tell. And someone would, so you would just produce that video and that's it. And, that's not what an agency or, a good agency or a good creative partner does. I think the main point is to flag, like, now we are in June and we have Pride just around the corner, and cause marketing, as it's called, is a thing. Like, a lot of brands just like jump in the bandwagon and they pay lip service to whatever the cause is for that for that month. I guess the point is, people don't buy that anymore. People see through, and to be the agency that like allow that to happen is that's not the job. So I think, as you said, like, yeah, you're not going to push for health. The idea that advertising leads to, it's about like misleading people to do stuff is is in the past, I guess. I hope. But in my experience, we try to counsel, to guide, to find elements and evidence that will open like opportunities that no one saw before. But it has to be true. Like people will, it's the social media age. Like people will find out if you're like putting an ad about, how committed to, pride you are, but you have a terrible policy when it comes to LGBTQ plus in your own company. So you fired people in the past, or, you don't do this, you don't do that. It will come. And there is no 30-second glossy TV commercial it will not prevent that from happening. So that, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Like it is great in PowerPoint land, as we call it, and anything. The beauty of PowerPoint is the most amazing technology of all. It supports anything. But when it comes to going out there, it's not as simple as that.
Well, when it comes to pride and supporting it, I think I can probably say as much as I want, because I'm sure some friends of mine have some footage of me in the last Pride parade I went to in Madrid, when I was left alone for about 20 minutes because someone was looking for a bathroom. And when they came back, there was a lot of integration going on. So I'm sure my credentials are well established. If someone were to challenge that footage would soon appear, my friends being as they are.
Yeah, I think this is just like the reactive, let's call it the reactive calendar. Pride is happening. The COVID-19 crisis happened. Now the Black Lives Matter, how do you say, like stand is happening right now across the globe, and brands they have to react somehow. They want to have a voice, or they want to have a share of that conversation. I'm not even considering the proactive stuff, like if you wrote somewhere that you do believe that you're about X or Y, like what are you actually going to do, like proactively, without the media calendar or the events around you pushing you to act.
One thing I struggle sometimes to understand when it comes to storytelling as used by larger corporations and big brands is, does whatever story or narrative that the client and the agency agreed, does it permeate everything that client is putting out there? Or is there a point when the elements are just so small, like slogans, for example, that the slogan is just a slogan? The slogan is not, the spear point of the narrative.
I see. Sometimes, companies are like people. They have previous baggage, and sometimes you need to play with the setting that you have. Like you might be planning to reposition a brand, and they have a new purpose and it's exciting. They can back it up. Everything is great, but there is like an asterisk, like, oh, we need to use this because it comes with whatever, or we need to use this type of medium because we already signed the deal with this media provider, or we cannot go into that market, or we cannot do this kind of thing because there's a legal implication. Yeah, answering I guess more directly your question, sometimes it does happen that you need to just put it here because we cannot, that's not a battle worth fighting. But usually it's about like following through that narrative, and yes, a slogan is very powerful. To be single-minded is one of the key strengths of this industry. How you condense information and make it exciting and make it memorable and actionable. That's one of the big strengths of this industry. Yeah, a slogan is never just a slogan, I would say. But yeah, sometimes it's the easiest way to explain to our moms, for instance, what we do. But
I write slogans. Well, yes, I suffer from a problem which is no job that I ever do seems to be particularly easy to explain. Is the Chandler effect. I write slogans would be a much easier one to get across. For years and years working sort of in the finance world, and it was very difficult to explain to people. I tell people what to do with their money, but what does that mean? Oh, come on.
Yeah. I'm not the guy writing the slogans usually, so for me it's also harder. Like, hey, yeah, I'm the middleman between a brand and a creative department, and the guy who actually writes the slogan, and I need to translate real world business information into insightful nuggets that people will use to explode into a fantastic story.
You have not strange, but you have a unusual background when it comes to. No, it's not. I'm not going into those stories. Don't worry about it. No, I was going to say that you have studied things that wouldn't necessarily be the most obvious things for people to study after you finish ed school. So, what is it that you did? Was a master's or a PhD on sociology?
Yeah, I'm a sucker for this. I love studying and acquiring information as my job requires, to be the person translating different worlds into, simple messages. Most of the time it requires you to deal with a lot of different information that you probably don't want to just take the summary you found online to explain stuff. So you need to go slightly deeper most of the time. And I've always been fascinated about cities and how cities are, alive and why do people gravitate towards cities and all that. So I decided after one of the big World Cup projects to study urban sociology here in London. And it's amazing. Like, it's one of the best things I've ever did, despite like being a full-time student, like growing up for a year and having to go back in time in terms of lifestyle, I'd say, how to survive a week with, I don't know, 20 pounds or something. And also like look for the cheapest beer you can find in the dodgy pubs in the area. But yeah, I also studied economic development, as, this is like one of the biggest discussions in today's world. Like, can the economy grow and not destroy the planet? And, it's probably like a very big question. But I particularly, gravitate towards those big questions. And I try to make up my mind by going into weird courses or, studying weird stuff.
So this was the time that you were trying to save money, and I think the dodgy place you used to go for beer was Brown's, wasn't it? Brown's in Hackney. Yes, lots of Brazilians there, I hear. No, but the reason I was asking about the education is because what I wanted to find out, if there is an answer to that, is how, if in any way this completely different study affected the way you deal with your normal work in advertising. I mean, have you found that you approach the narratives you build or the way you approach companies, has that changed because of this completely separate thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I consider my job to be about people, humans. Thankfully now, I think the industry is treating more about, is approaching from a human angle rather than a consumer angle only. And it comes, and, apologies for like going like too far on this one. But like the idea that, we are the rational economic man, the homo economicus, that makes like rational decisions, that, we're selfish and we want to splurge, and like all those things that came with the definition over the years. I mean, we are slowly realizing that's not true. Like, people are inconsistent, people are emotional, people are erratic. Like, and I think, like studying urban sociology, like, helped me go on the ground, as we say, like, and just like see more of that stuff and find out different ways to understand that, to research that, and bring that information in a more palatable form.
Let me just bring us back to storytelling before we're done, because you worked for a long time in Brazil, and you work for AB InBev, as you mentioned, and what AB InBev do is beer. And in Brazil, and I don't know if that's necessarily the case in Europe, as I don't watch much TV here, but in Brazil, most beer commercials are the most cliched type of advertising that ever was, at least the ones I remember. They always involve people having fun on the beach and very healthy women parading around. Now, is there something deeper that I just didn't know enough about humanity or advertising or storytelling to pick up from those commercials? Is there an agency really trying very hard to build a narrative there? Or were they just as plain as I remember them to be?
I mean, I didn't pick that phase when I was in Brazil. Yes, it is like very straightforward, I would say, like to put ladies in a bikini and just put like a beer bottle there and say,
where can I buy it? It works.
But I would say that, this is probably one of the projects I'm most proud of. It was a long push, and of course I didn't do it by myself. But like, how do you change the mind of a company like that? They used to do talk to people through TV commercials by doing those approaches to for instance, have a different way to talk to people. And I remember I arrived back in Brazil just before, like at the end of 2012, and Brazil is hosting the 2014 World Cup, and people were like mad about it, like, oh man, there's money going to football stadiums and not to health or education, and there was a thing in Brazil, like, oh, if it is a saying going that if it is bad now, imagina na Copa. Can you imagine during the World Cup? If it's not working now, imagine during the World Cup. That was kind of like the cultural mood, if you like. And I think we were like super bold and brave to the client and the agency to say, what, we're gonna change people's perception, and it is going to be amazing because that's what we do as Brazilians. And to go for that, for a mainstream brand, that sells beer, and every market share point is a lot of money. So there is no risking if there is no gain to be had. So I think, I would argue that at least AB InBev has been like very, very brave when they picked up that there is a shift in society and in culture, and we cannot keep doing what we were doing. And I think that's what brands and ultimately agencies do. Like, you need to understand culture so you can reflect the right story, so people can identify, can find utility, can be entertained, or can feel empowered to do something they wouldn't do otherwise. But I think, the cultural discussion is a very interesting one. You just try to embrace culture, or you try to create culture. And I think when we, as I guess civilians, we can call it, or I do call it like that when I'm not like wearing my professional hat. When I remember an ad from whatever, like 20 years ago, it's probably someone who managed to create culture. And, I see myself singing a jingle, or, I remember a TV commercial, or, an experience that I've been to, even though it's been ages and I don't remember what I had yesterday for breakfast.
Yes, I think that I tend to think of that as narrative, as story. And it's remarkable how much certain things become the story that we remember. I had a conversation with our mutual friend Antenor, who studies history, and we were talking about how much history at the end of the day is the story that became the official version of it, or the story that we remember. And there's so many things that became part and do become part of our day-to-day life, but everything has different angles you could look at. So the fact that something became part of culture, as you said, is to some extent the merit of a storyteller, of a group of storytellers who decided this is who we are as a company, this is who we are as a brand, this is who we are as a country. If people remember that, you told that story well. If people don't remember that, then you didn't.
100% agree. I think that's brilliant. And I'm passionate about history and like everything that helps I guess form a story, economics, sociology, geography, like everything, all those components. And I guess going back to your earlier question, like, why do you go into those weird places? Because that is how stories are formed. That's how we create impact. It's about making people give a shit. If people don't give a shit at the end of the day, like, I didn't do my job. I can create like amazing PowerPoints and everyone will be excited and high-fiving and doing everything. But at the end of the day, if you don't create an impact in real people on the streets, then didn't happen. So that's why you need to, yeah, as you said, like understand like why leave no stones unturned. That's one thing that I always embrace. Like there is no way, we are just rational and selfish, for instance, even though we are pushed to believe that, this is how the human brain works. And, if you do communicate in this way, in those nuggets, people will do those things. Yeah, maybe to a certain extent, but we're still people. We'll fuck up. We'll be inconsistent. We probably, most of us, the functional ones, will be coherent. Every time, for instance, a client asks me to, I want to be more human. And it's like, well, then you need to stop being consistent. You need to be coherent, because that's what humans do. You don't say the same thing over and over and over, day after day after day. Like you kind of like have your personality. You believe in a few things and you act in a certain way. And within those boundaries, you are coherent. Maybe, if you have a breakup, you be like out of that space. But usually that's how humans work. So are you willing to do that as a brand? And the brave ones, they do. And that's the exciting thing. You look at Nike, I would frame them as a coherent brand and not just a consistent brand. Maybe they bring the consistency through the filming, to the treatment they do they give to films, and to the strap line, the Just Do It. But beyond that, they can tell stories in a very erratic way, if you like, but they all lead to the same place without saying the same thing.
It reminds me a little that this dichotomy between the consistent and the coherent, a little bit about this thing that's become a pain in the ass buzzword now, which is authenticity. But if you are authentic, you will be coherent. You'll be variations of the same person or company, but they will all come back to, oh yeah, but that is a Nike thing to do, or that is a Daniel or a Francisco thing to do, but it's not consistent. And I think that is also a good thing, because if you and I had remained consistent, maybe we'd still be back at taking 48-hour bus journeys and drinking 50 proof cachaça for 2 days. And I think it would have stopped a lot of the other things we've done in our lives. So consistency wouldn't have served us. Coherence, yes, I'm pretty sure we've changed that nonsense to less lethal approaches to fun. But I get that, and I do like that. And I think it's, I hadn't heard it put it that way before. But is that your definition, or is that an industry thing?
I haven't read anywhere, so I don't want to that someone else created. But no, I think it goes back to the human point. I'm really obsessed about, as a sociologist, about people, like what makes people do the things they're doing, especially in an urban environment, and you have culture surrounding that. So yeah, I think in a way, like the person who does the same thing, every day is a strange person, right? So slowly, I think, brands are realizing that. And the great thing about, doing more story doing, if you like, is that, actions sometimes are more powerful, and you don't have, you're not going to do the same thing all the time. So you can approach it from different angles, I guess. And that makes it fresh and exciting and easier to relate to. But yeah, I think the coherence point is something I have strong for a few years. Like, if we are to be more human, we need to embrace that trait, because that is how humans behave and how we tell our stories, basically, right?
I wanted to just ask if anyone wants to find you or more of the work you do. Are you anywhere? I mean, locked at home right now, but I don't even know if you are online a great deal.
I think I am in the hearts of all my friends and family.
It's true. It's not a common mistake to make, but yes.
But people can find me on LinkedIn, even though I'm on shared parental leave and I'm kind of like less active on that part of life. But yeah, that's the best way to find me.
Mate, thank you very much for your time today. I hope lockdown is over soon, because what I'm seeing here in the video, I mean, this is not sustainable. that hair needs cutting. But other than that, I also hope we can see each other again soon, other than through a video interaction.
Great. Me too. Thanks for having me. This has been really fun. Thanks for having me, Francisco.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Take care of yourselves. And until next time.